that. Okay. Okay, so we're at the end of 15. And just to kind of give us a little bit of backstory. Oh, by the way, you need a pen and a highlighter. Okay? I want you to write this down somewhere in your book, whether it's in the margin here or whatever. But we've had a lot of adventures thus far in the book, but things are going to go into more depth pretty much from here on out, okay? And I need you to jot this down. Mark Twain once said that this is a book about a boy whose heart does battle with his conscience, his head. And his conscience is defeated. Jot this down. Mark Twain said this is a book about a boy whose heart does battle with his conscience, and his conscience is defeated. Okay, so here's the thing. Let me explain. So we know that Huck doesn't necessarily, grow up within society. I mean, he's kind of on the outskirts. He wasn't formally educated until the widow adopted him, and he wasn't raised in the church or anything like that. But, he's able to view what society thinks and what it, dictates as the law. And so as he's helping Jim, it's kind of working on his conscience, because helping a runaway slave in the South pre-Civil War was against the law, right? You got to remember that this was a time when people of the South, by and large, justified slavery. I mean, you would even hear ministers preaching that it was justified and quoting passages of the Bible, because you can justify anything if you take something out of context, right? So that is society working on Huck. He's helping Jim. Society says that is wrong. His heart, on the other hand, loves Jim. I mean, they've become very close. And so his heart's telling him to do what he can for his friend. And Twain said that really is what this book is all about. A boy and how his head and his heart kind of do battle with each other. And Twain tells us that the heart wins. Which means that when it's important, ultimately, what is Huck going to choose? Jim. Yeah, because it's the right thing to do. And we know it's the right thing to do. As readers, we know it's the right thing to do. But he's conflicted because of what, he's heard given the society at the time, right? So, for instance, he and Jim, when they're on the river, and this is a key idea too, you might want to jot this down as well. When they're on the river and it's just like Huck and Jim on the raft, life's pretty good. They can just be like two human beings talking to each other and, fishing and visiting. And, they have to travel at night along that river. Why would they have to travel at night? That's pretty obvious. They can't be seen, right? Everybody thinks Huck's dead. He faked his murder, right? And then, of course, Jim is wanted. I mean, they have search parties out looking for him. There's a bounty on his head, right? So they got to travel by night and hole up during the day and sleep, right? So at night, it's real quiet. And they can fish and they can visit, and often they lay back and just look at the stars. I mean, this is a pretty peaceful time for both of them. They don't have to be a runaway kid and a runaway slave. They are just who they are. It's just Huck and Jim. Y'all, it's when they go ashore that things become dangerous and ugly. So there's this big contrast between like the peace on the raft and then what they have to deal with on the shore. Because once they go ashore, no, they can't just be Huck and Jim. They've got to be the two runaways. One a poor white kid and the other a slave, right? And society kind of puts that label on them. But you need to know that there's quite the difference between the two. Now, geographically, this is important, okay? Geographically, we got the Mississippi River, and of course, you know, it's flowing south, right? You got the Ohio River, and it's flowing south, and they merge at a little town called Cairo. It's in Illinois, okay? Well, Huck and Jim's plan, and it's only mentioned briefly, but Huck and Jim's plan is to take the raft down the Mississippi, travel by night, right? Look for Cairo, and at Cairo, they're going to ditch the raft, and they're going to like try to board a steamboat, stow away somehow, and then go back up into the Free States, which is, of course, where Jim needs to be, right? Problem is, and we don't know it yet, but the problem is the big fog that rolls in that separates them in chapter 15. On the night of that big fog, they pass Cairo. So they miss their opportunity to hook up with the Ohio and move north. So they find themselves sailing further and further south. And I'm a child of the South. I grew up here, right? And I love the South, but the South pre-Civil War, Twain illustrates that the further south they go, the uglier things are along the shore. Okay? So that's kind of what we're dealing with as we go into this middle section of the book. Now, as for chapter 15, did y'all find that spot? It was a monstrous big river here. Do y'all see that? Okay. So that particular night, big fog rolls in. Huck is on the canoe. Jim is on the raft. They get separated, and they go the whole night trying to find each other. Okay? And they can't find each other, right? So here is Huck. It's a monstrous big river here with the tallest and the thickest kind of timber on both banks, just a solid wall, as well as I could see by the stars. I looked away downstream and seen a black speck on the water. I took out after it, but when I got to it, weren't nothing but a couple of saw logs made fast together. Then I see another speck, chase that, and then another, and this time I was right. It was the raft. So he finds the raft, okay? Now Jim's asleep. When I got to it, Jim was sitting there with his head down between his knees asleep, with his right arm hanging over the steering oar. The other oar was smashed off, and the raft was littered up with leaves and branches and dirt. She'd had a rough time. So, the big storm caused quite the mess on the raft, right? I made fast and laid down under Jim's nose on the raft and begun to gap and stretch my fists out against Jim, and I said, "Hello, Jim. Have I been asleep? Why didn't you stir me up?" "Good gracious, that you, Huck? You ain't dead? You ain't drowned, you's back again? It's too good to be true, honey. It's too good to be true. Let me look at you, child. Let me feel of you." "No, you ain't dead. You's back again, live and sound. Same old Huck. Same old Huck, thanks to goodness." "What's the matter with you, Jim? You've been drinking." All right, now the first time we see Jim and Huck together, Huck and his buddy Tom are going to play a trick on Jim. Okay? That was way back at the very beginning of the story. Now, Huck has also played a trick on Jim when they were on Jackson Island, and it almost killed Jim. What was that? Do you remember?
The
snake. Yeah, he put that dead snake in Jim's blanket, thinking it would be funny to scare him, and then the snake's mate came and actually bit Jim. Well, here's a third prank on Jim, okay? And he's doing it, just because he's a kid, and kids do that kind of stuff, but Jim's going to teach him quite a lesson, okay? "You've been drinking. Drinking? Has I been drinking? Has I had a chance to be drinking? Well, what makes you talk so wild?" "How does I talk wild? How? Why, ain't you been talking about my coming back and all that stuff as if I'd been gone away?" "Huck Finn, you looked me in the eye. Ain't you been gone away?" "Gone away? Why, what in the nation do you mean? I ain't been gone anywheres. Where would I go?" "Well, looky here, boss. There's something wrong there is. Is I me? Who is I? Is I here? What is I?" Now, that's what I want to know. So Jim's all kind of confused, right? Well, Jim has fallen asleep, and Huck is going to say, "I've been here the whole time." And Jim is going to be convinced that this was like a dream, right? And so he goes into interpreting the dream, because Jim's a storyteller. It's what he does, right? So skip to the paragraph. It's about a page ahead that starts with, "So Jim went to work and told me the whole thing." Do y'all see that? Okay. "So Jim went to work, told me the whole thing right through, just as it happened, only he painted it up considerable," which means what?
Amazing much.
Yeah, like he embellished, he exaggerated, right? Then he said he must start in to interpret it because it was sent for a warning, and he goes into this, interpretation of it. Now, skip ahead a couple of paragraphs to where Huck says it had clouded up pretty dark just after I got onto the raft, but now it was clearing up again. So here's Huck. Oh, well, that's all interpreted well enough as far as that goes, Jim, I says, but what does these things stand for? It was the leaves and rubbish on the raft and the smashed door. You could see them first rate now. Highlight all this, by the way. Jim looked at the trash and looked at me and back at the trash again. He got the dream fixed so strong in his head, he couldn't seem to shake it loose and get the facts back in place again right away. But when he did get things straightened around, he looked at me steady without smiling and says, what they stand for, I'm gonna tell you. When I got all wore out with work and with calling for you and went to sleep, my heart was most broke because you was lost and I didn't care no more what become of me in the raft. And I wake up and find you back again all safe and sound. The tears come and I could have got down on my knees and kissed your foot. I was so thankful. And all you was thinking about was how you could make a fool of old Jim with a lie. That truck there is trash. And trash is what people is that puts dirt on the heads of their friends and makes them ashamed. I mean, it's a beautiful lesson, right? What does he teach Huck about?
Honesty.
Yeah, honesty. What else?
Friendship.
Friendship. He teaches them about friendship. You don't treat your friends this way. It's a great lesson. And Huck does take it to heart. Now, it's discouraging because at the very end of the chapter, he says, well, I worked myself up and went and apologized. But the language he uses is disappointing because at this point we think, Huck's come a long way, right? And then he uses some of the language of society at that time, and it's kind of like he backslides a bit. So I think if we're going to try to interpret that or analyze that, it's maybe this, that Huck is learning, but he's not quite where he needs to be yet. Does that make sense? So his heart tells him to do one thing, but he's still real worried about what society says as well. And he really probably shouldn't be because he's run off from society, right? Okay, so we don't have a lot of time, but we have a little bit of time left. I need y'all to spend that time with the short story. Did y'all go home and read some of it last night? Because that would be very helpful if you did. You got a Google form due tonight on the fall of the House of Usher.